Pitchers and catchers have officially reported for the Seattle Mariners. Spring has sprung, ladies and gentlemen, and we're going to talk about the Mariners spring training track so far, who's already there, when the first game is, and more. We're then going to talk about the recent Nick Pivetta signing to the San Diego Padres, what that means for the Padres rotation, and what that means for the Mariners' ability to trade one of their starting pitchers this spring. And we're going to wrap it all up by talking about a video that Joe made about the tier lists of the AL West, where I think those are, and if I think that the tier lists are indicative of where the teams will finish this year. Thank you guys so much for watching episode 165 of the Hit It Here podcast, part of the Bleav Network, the anonymous donor, and the Benjamin Avery episode of the podcast. Benjamin donated $51, little ode to Ichiro Suzuki there. So Benjamin, thank you so much for that donation, and to the anonymous donation as well. I will say, we just got over $1,400 on the fundraiser. We are $99 away from Joe, who said that he would shave his head at $1,500. Joe would be shaving his head while he's down in spring training with me. Joe, how do we feel about that?
So it's not just shaving my head. There was an agreement on Twitter with Stu, if you remember.
Oh, that's right.
A little handshake adjustment bet to this whole shaving my head thing, which will eventually result in me shaving my head fully anyways, because I refuse to rock a reverse mohawk for longer than I need to. So I'm what's the word? Mimicked? That's not the right word. I mimed it. That's what I was trying to say. Just now, I would just shave a literal stripe down the middle of my head. And that's what I'll look like when I'm down in spring training with Colton for the week that I'm there and meeting some of you guys. Really great first impression. Am I allowed to wear a hat?
I feel like yes, because no, you have to, because otherwise your head's going to get sunburned. And I'm not dealing with that.
I'm just going to get a burnt stripe down the middle of my head. Because
you're just going to complain the whole time. I'm going
to need you to rub aloe down the middle of my scalp. God. So yeah, we're closing in on that. That's exciting. Again, regardless, like, I'll shave a stripe down the middle of my head for a reverse mohawk, but also after that, I'm just going to have to shave it again regardless, because I'm going to need it to grow back like relatively evenly. Yeah, so that'll be good. It's like a 2-for-1, a little bang for your buck, but the spring has sprung, as the jokes that we'll make for the the rest of time every single season, as long as we can. Mariners and everybody else, I think everyone else is there already, right? Like all the other teams, like pitchers and catchers, like,
yes,
right? Like, it's just like the universal pitchers and catchers day. And so we saw some little blips, little clips of people being there. It's exciting. Just like, Super Bowl happened, Luka Doncic got traded, whatever, right? It's baseball season, right? Pitchers and catchers have reported, and that's very exciting. Getting the ball rolling on that, like, just seeing what everyone's looking like. Cal looking a little lean, low-key. I know, was it last year or the year before, where you're like, he kind of lost some of his dumper?
Yeah, I think it was last year.
Yeah, so he's coming into camp lean again, whether or not that's, a problem. I mean, 34 and 100 RBI last year with Mr. Lean Dumper coming into camp, so we'll see how that kind of shakes out for the rest of it. But anything that you want to touch on from players that are already reporting, and kind of what we've seen so far?
No, I mean, we've seen Julio's down there, like we mentioned, all the pitchers are down there. I think the one starting pitcher that has yet to throw a bullpen so far was George Kirby. It's possible maybe he's just not down there yet. Maybe he had a vacation or something pre-planned, who knows, right? But the official report date for the hitters and whatnot, I believe, is Thursday, so today that this is going out. Might be Friday, but either way, first Mariners game is coming up here on Saturday of next week. And so, yeah, I think that from what we've seen, also off topic here, it looks like part of the backfields have changed a little bit. And maybe it's just while guys are down there at the beginning and they're going to pull it back. But it looks like where the pitching mounds are, it's extended out now into that grassy area, and they have a whole spot for Perry Hill and the crew to do some infield stuff. Now, I don't know if that's a permanent thing, but it looked like it extended all the way to the sidewalk, which is cool. Would be a bummer that we can't get as up close and personal to the bullpens if that is the case. Again, it was kind of hard to tell from the video itself if that actually did happen. but that's just kind of what it looked like. But it could have been on the other side as well. So yeah, pretty exciting, man. I'm excited to be down there in the sunshine. I was looking at the weather report, and it's like in the mid 60s right now.
Okay.
And the day I get down there, it's like 85.
Any rain so far that you can scout out, or?
So while I'm down there, no, I think it may have rained there today.
Oh,
But
okay.
yeah, yeah, 85, and it's been like hasn't cracked above like 40 here for the past like month.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
You're gonna
I'm gonna
melt.
die. I'm gonna die. But I don't know, man. I'm excited. It's great to see pitchers and catchers back doing their thing. I think that we're gonna get a lot of content over the next week or so with all the players reporting.
Mm.
We'll get a lot of like Julio batting practice content, maybe some Randy, like maybe we'll get like a Randy fit check video or something like that.
Sure.
Of him pulling into spring training. Yeah, it's gonna be super exciting, man. I'm pretty pumped.
Did you see the like webcast and schedule release?
Oh, like what days it's actually going to be,
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't remember them off the top of my head. They're probably on the internet somewhere. But there's 8 webcasts and 7 televised games, so 15 total games. So it's like a little under half of the games that they'll play. But I mean, I think 8 webcasts is up from like 2 or 3 from last year. That's a huge dub. It's something that I don't think is like overly important, but something that I was excited for, to see that the webcasts are like they're back and like pretty fleshed out.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, only about half the games being televised is a bummer. Like, that sucks, man. Like, that's awesome. The team's down in spring training, but can we watch them? But you know what, Joe? That's why we're going down to Peoria, baby. We're going down there to give you guys all the behind the scenes content. That's right. So make sure you're subscribed to this YouTube channel, Joe. So we got some breaking news that the Red Sox are signing Alex Bregman. This is a very interesting deal, one that I know that we both have some thoughts on. A 3-year, $120 million deal with 2 opt-outs after the first and after the second year. $40 million a year, Bregman to play third base for the Boston Red Sox, meaning that Rafi Devers will probably move over there to first base. What does that mean for the Mariners, Joe? Because that means Tristan Casas is all of a sudden no longer like guaranteed a spot over there at first base. And the Red Sox are no longer in on Nolan Arenado, another guy who I think makes a lot of sense for the Mariners. Could this signing, this is best case scenario, right? He doesn't go back to the Astros. He makes Arenado more available, and he makes Casas more available for the Seattle Mariners. How do you feel like anything could come of this on the Mariners front?
I think I would have preferred the Cubs making Horner available or something along those lines. Also gets him out of the American League. But regardless, I think this is definitely preferred than him going to Houston. I don't necessarily disagree with you there. I really don't know if it's Rafi going to first or if he's going to DH.
But then what do they do with Yoshida?
So I think if I'm the Red Sox, I am going to figure out a way to get rid of Masataka Yoshida, right? And keep Tristan Casas and have Devers DH. Because I feel like their outfield of Duran, Wheeler Abreu's out there, and then their top prospect, Roman Anthony, they're not going to try, I don't know, in half a year's time, like in the middle of the summer, they're not going to want to give Yoshida at bats over Roman Anthony, more than likely. Because dude's like a super prospect. He's I don't know. If I'm the Red Sox, they're finding a way to deal Yoshida before they're finding a way to deal Tristan Casas, in my opinion. That doesn't necessarily benefit the Mariners in what their position of need could be. Yoshida's more valuable than Mitch Haniger, I can tell you that. He would be a better DH for the Mariners than Mitch Haniger would be, but obviously the payroll stuff's a little funky. Like, how does that really work out? Because you're not gonna get a roster swap, you're not gonna be able to swap contracts there without giving the Red Sox more back, because Haniger is not nearly as valuable as Yoshida, although Yoshida's not that much more valuable. Of course, Tristan Casas is the ideal situation for the Mariners if it is Devers going to first base. This news just broke. However it shapes out, we won't fully know entirely. They still got Rafaela. Is he just going to be a super utility man, or is he going to be out there in one of the corners, or if he's going to center and Duran goes back to left or something? There's a lot of options that this opens up for the Red Sox to kind of consider. The AAV is crazy $40 million for Bregman's insane to me. And I don't know, the opt-out stuff, just like, I don't like this style of contract. It feels really fun. Like, I don't know. I don't know like why I feel so like negative towards like this style. Like 1 year with an opt-out, it just feels like crappy. Not that like players need to sign like long-term deals for these teams and blah 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 blah. Like obviously hasn't worked out. Like Bryant with the Rockies hasn't worked out. Like had Snell stayed with the Giants, how would that have turned out? Probably not as good as he's going to be with the Dodgers. Like I get like the business side of it. It just beeps until I go open the door. So it's just, I don't know. I don't love this style of contract, but it's good for the Red Sox in general.
Yeah, it's interesting, Joe, because I think that there's a possibility that they could slide Bregman to second base.
Mm-hmm.
And that immediately leaves Rafi over there at third, Cassis over there at first base. Now, of course, that even if they move him over to second base, there's still, different players that could become available for it. But yeah, in terms of the contract, I don't love it either. Having the opt-out after a year, he's just basically a rental. Like, I would almost expect him to try free agency again next offseason to try to get a longer-term deal. With that being said, though, if he's making $40 million AAV, like, that's a tough deal to turn down. Do you play out your 3 years in Boston and see where your market's at, in 3 years? Maybe. I don't know. And so obviously this is very fresh. This happened like 20 minutes ago or something like that. I think that there's a chance that this opens up more room to add players for the Mariners, Cassis or Arenado, etc. But like you mentioned, it doesn't have to. Like the Red Sox, if they want to put the best team possible on the field, they probably keep Cassis,
of course,
over there at first base.
I think the best team on the field for them is, like you said, Bregman at second, though. Like, realistically. Because whatever production you're going to get out of whoever would be at second base to start the year, as opposed to Bregman. Like, I don't know, Bregman at second, Devers at third, Cassis at first, and Yoshida at DH is better than Bregman at third, Cassis at first, and then like Yoshida gone, and with Devers at DH, and then like David Hamilton. Like, I don't think Christian Campbell's going to be ready. Like, he's not going to be their opening day second base. But like Bregman, I think going to second base, if he's willing to, that's like a huge upgrade for the Red Sox. And also, I mean, I don't know how many years he is removed from it, and of course they also have Rafaela who can play shortstop if need be. But like if Trevor Story continues to have some injury problems, I mean, Bregman's played short in the past. He stepped in for Correa. Like, that's almost like an insurance policy in and of itself there too, for a pretty important position.
And for the Red Sox, they have Marcelo Meyer down there as well. Like you mentioned, Campbell. And I think that, so when you look at the Red Sox depth chart right now, the number one person on the depth chart at second base is Rafaela, but he's also the number one player on the depth chart in center field. So, like, I don't know. Rafaela probably is just relegated to center field at that point, with Romy Gonzalez being the next guy up at second base. So yeah, I think it just makes sense to move him to second base at that point. Like, how available is Vaughn Grisham? And like, you probably don't have to give up a lot for him, but would I feel better with Vaughn Grisham on this roster than like Leo Rivas? Probably. Like, I think I would like that more. We talked about it, or we will talk about it here later in this podcast. Let's break the fourth wall here about the depth of the Mariners bench and how we don't love it. Like, could this be a position where the Mariners are able to add depth to the team because of this move? Maybe. And I think that Arenado, the one spot that it sounded like he was going to go was the Red Sox. They so much so that there was said to have a structure in place for if Bregman went elsewhere of what the trade would look like. That's not going to happen now. We know the Cardinals still want to trade Arenado. The money gets weird. We know that for the Mariners and for the Cardinals, but there's a way that they could find a way to move some of that money around where the Cardinals get better in the long run, but the Mariners get better in 2025. And if you get Arenado and move Polanco back to third base, like, so be it. Or sorry, back to second base, like, so be it. And I think that might be a move the Mariners should be willing to make.
You said the money does get funky, but ultimately, and we all know that it maybe we're we're living in fantasy land thinking about like how these moves impact the Mariners kind of a situation. Because every move that we've thought, it really hasn't up until this point. If for whatever reason, John Stanton decides to see the light, you know what I mean? His mind's eye is granted some sort of clarity. They're like, you know what? A little more money won't hurt. It might benefit the team. Adding Arenado, moving Polanco back to second, or having Polanco just be your everyday DH in that situation.
Yeah.
That provides so much more depth to the roster, which is something that the Mariners are severely lacking going into 2025. Like, it's their roster depth, at least what we feels like right now, is an embarrassment.
And I think that the biggest thing that they can do to move some money around, Joe, would be trading Luis Castillo. And there's been a signing that has changed the way that a trade of Luis Castillo could look, and that was Nick Pivetta signing with the San Diego Padres. The team that the Mariners share the Peoria Sports Complex with made like one of their first moves of the offseason, finally. On, I guess, at the end of the offseason, whatever.
At the buzzer.
So it's a weird one. All right, so the Padres signed former Red Sox starting pitcher Nick Pivetta to a 4-year, $55 million deal. Now, for those of you that don't remember, Pivetta turned down the qualifying offer at the beginning of the offseason, which was worth like 21, 22, something like that, $1 million. And yeah, that was a guy who at the very beginning of the offseason, I think you and I both said, like, that's shocking that he turned it down, because he wasn't like over the top good. In 2024, he had a 4.14 ERA in 27 games with a 1.126 WHIP, like 145 innings. Good strikeout pitcher, great strikeout pitcher. But it was very shocking to see him turn that down. His deal, like I said, it has 2 opt-outs, one after year 2, one after year 3. His pay during year 1 is $1 million with a $3 million signing bonus. So overall, he gets paid a total of $4 million in year 1. This deal is, again, like I said, very strange, but also one that sets up the Padres, Joe, to do something maybe they've talked about all offseason, and that is trading Dylan Cease. Now, their pitching staff's pretty good. Obviously, Dylan Cease is probably the ace of that staff. Dylan Cease being more easily traded by them at this point in the offseason is huge for the Padres to be able to go out there and make some more moves, because they do have some holes that they need to fill. They were obviously a very good team, looked great in the playoffs last year, but need some more help. I think being able to trade Dylan Cease is going to be able to do that, Joe. What does that mean, though, with Dylan Cease being more easily accessible for the Mariners' hopes of trading one of their starting pitchers as we get later into spring?
It's weird, because I don't know if it makes Cease all that much more available. Like, it does, but like at the same time it doesn't, because like Pivetta's taking such a big pay cut in year 1 compared to the rest of his contract. You said it was obviously 1 year, or $1 million with a $3 million signing bonus at the front. Then it's what, 19 in the second year, 14 in the third, and then 16 in the final.
18 in the final.
18 in the final. So it's like, it's a very bizarre, like a weirdly structured contract. So him only taking on like $4 million of like their budgets, or just their payroll in general for 2025. I don't know if it necessarily means that they have to trade Dylan Cease. Obviously, like come the middle of the season, if that's something that makes sense for them to do, of course. I think like you can get like a month or 2 out of him, see how he's doing, and see how the team's doing. Like if you're winning like a lot, maybe you wait. If you're losing a lot, then you can like pivot and then trade him then.
What I think's interesting is that the Padres have different needs, I guess, than the Mariners in terms of where they're at. They need to shed some payroll. That's kind of been talked about a little bit. They are also under new ownership.
Yeah.
That was a very the whole situation's so strange. I don't want to act like I can really understand it, but they are under new ownership. I think a trade with the Orioles for the Padres could be different pieces than what the Mariners will be looking for. For like, I think a trade that starts with Colton Cowser and Ryan Mountcastle could make a lot of sense for the Padres. A start of the trade, not the whole thing. The start of the trade, because it fills their left field spot where maybe they would rather have Cowser out there than somebody like Jason Hayward. And at first base, they can put Mountcastle and then have Luis Arraez be an everyday DH.
Yeah.
And I think that again, that's not enough to get it done, in my opinion. I think you need at least one more piece going back to the Padres in that scenario. But when it comes to what the Mariners would be looking for, they'd probably be looking for a little bit longer term player in return. They'd be looking for an infielder that isn't named Ryan Mountcastle in return. So yeah, I think that it'd be interesting to see, depending on what the Orioles, I know we always go to them, but they just have the most talented, like, up and coming guys that really are all blocked. So it's easy to pick on the Orioles in this situation. But depending on what the Orioles would want to do, and depending on what kind of trades they'd want to make, I'd be interested to see like what pieces they'd be willing to give up for either Castillo or for Cease. Now, there's a good chance that neither of those things happen. And like you said, it would make a whole lot of sense for them to go into 2025 with Cease at the top end of their rotation, at least until Joe Musgrove's healthy. I don't know when he'll be healthy. It might be the start of the season. I don't know. But when I look at their starting five,
Musgrove got Tommy
like mid-season.
He got Tommy John in like October.
This last October?
2024. Yeah.
I thought he got it in 2023.
Musgrove was pitching last year.
Oh.
And then he got hurt at the end of the season.
Oh.
So yeah, like their rotation right now is Cease, King, Darvish, Pivetta, and then Waldron, Randy Vasquez. Like they're not in the best spot, I'd say, as like rotation depth is concerned. Like I guess like quality rotation depth. So it's interesting, like trading Cease and like making yourself that much more like vulnerable to even worse outcomes. Like if you trade Dylan Cease and you don't get like a starter back in that trade, obviously of lesser value. Say we're still going to the Orioles, you get Dean Kramer, right? That's a fine guy to plug in at the back end of your rotation. But like the moment one of them goes down, it's like, okay, who are we going to plug this in with? And if we're still planning on contending in the National League West, obviously there's 3 wild card spots up for grabs. I think everyone can probably pencil in the Dodgers as the winners of the West if they really want to. And the Padres probably looking at themselves like, yeah, we can compete for a wild card, most definitely. If they trade Cease, they should try and factor in getting a pitcher back. So that way they're not completely floundering in that department. Sure, King took a big step forward. He's been great. I still think how dominant pitching can be, it's much more beneficial to be deep there as opposed to deep in like a corner outfield spot.
Agreed. Especially when you have the offensive juggernaut of the Dodgers who just re-signed Clayton Kershaw, by the way.
For whatever reason. Just to vibe out in the clubhouse.
And Kike Hernandez, both clubhouse guys. But it's like, they have so many pitchers. We don't need to get into that, but it's just like, it's weird to look at around that division and like try to compare like starting rotations to each other and like positions. And that's what you did, Joe, in the AL West, where you compared every position for every team. So all the catchers in the AL West on a tier list. Some interesting things in there that I was a bit surprised about. And it sounds like you were too in your video. Give me some of the key ones that you were like, that kind of shocked you a little bit.
Shortstop depth is like pretty crazy. I knew Zach Neto had a great year last year. I wasn't expecting 3.5 wins, and seeing that projection stay true in 2025, I think is probably pretty accurate. But like he's good. Zach Neto's good. Like it's just kind of like anyone on the Angels is good? ? It's kind of interesting. But JP being the least valuable shortstop projected by just Fangraphs, whatever, it's kind of crazy because like just in 2023, like he was the most valuable short, like well, I guess probably not Corey Seager, but like because he was injured part of the year, he finished top 3 in MVP, so like that's a different conversation. But like not counting Corey Seager, JP was the best shortstop in the American League West, so like he's second. Now he's behind Jeremy Pena and Jacob Wilson as well. I mean, obviously JP took a step backwards last year, so it's like I don't necessarily disagree with that sentiment, but seeing how deep the position is in the American League West was kind of interesting. No player below 3 wins, like that's kind of crazy. Like I was very shocked by it. The main thing I think I just look at when I was kind of like going through each team's roster resource pages, the amount of depth that the Rangers have offensively kind of put it into perspective. Like the moves that they've made this offseason, some laterally, like trading Nathaniel Lowe, but you get Jake Berger. But like signing Jock Peterson, it seemed like if the Mariners had signed anyone to be their DH, that immediately relegates Mitch Haniger to a bench role or DFA'd off the roster. But like it's an upgrade at that position regardless. Like the fact, and I know it's not like Haniger's probably not going to start every game at DH. Like that's just like how the roster resource page looked. And that's kind of what I wanted to format it as. So, like I saw some comments like Haniger shouldn't be the everyday. Like I know, trust me, I know. I was just kind of formatting it how it was presented to me already. But like getting point two WAR. Sure, DH is never a WAR production position. But like you look at just like overall like value there. Jordan's at 5.5. Every other team has someone that's going to be at least worth 2 wins, probably. And you're going to get more production out of that outside of like just the usual suspects. Like the Astros could probably get 6 wins of value from their DH spot in 2025 because Jordan's not going to DH every single game. Brent Rooker's not going to DH every single game. Like there's going to be players that will accumulate WAR at those positions. The Mariners are probably looking at like half a win. If we're lucky, if Garver bounces back. But like I have no faith in Haniger, and it's just like some of the things in there really kind of like damn. Had they made like one extra move, the depth on this roster, and it was something that we applauded last year with the moves of like Jorge Polanco coming in and like Luke Raley, like how that and just how that kind of like fleshed out the roster. It felt like, I mean, even Rojas and like Urias, like it was like not as exciting, but the depth on the roster last year, sure, it didn't work out, but it felt better than it does right now. And whether or not that's roster resources fault for including Austin Shenton and Dom Canzone on that list still, but getting from your bench 1.8 FWAR as like projections when the Rangers are getting 5 wins out of their bench. Like you want, if you're going to be a championship roster, you need to have a valuable bench. Right now, why would anybody on the Mariners bench play over anybody in the starting lineup outside of Donovan Solano? There isn't a reason for it because there's no one of like real tangible value on the Mariners bench.
And that's why when you and I did, I was either the last podcast or one before that, when we looked at like the Pacoda projection for standings, and the Mariners were 3rd, I wasn't shocked. Like that, like the team is, in my opinion, objectively worse than it was at the end of 2024, which is tough to say because like obviously you're relying on bounce backs from guys. So you could say, is the team worse because you're expecting that Garver and Polanco aren't going to bounce back? Not necessarily. But I have said it before. I expect a regression to the mean from everyone. Whether that be, you know, Victor Robles coming back down to earth. Maybe Polanco gets a little bit better. But then if you lose stuff from Robles, okay, well, what's that mean? Like, cool, I'm glad Polanco's better. That's awesome. Robles is bad again. Great. So it's kind of it's like a net neutral. Like, that's just where we are. And so, yeah, I think that doesn't shock me too much. I honestly was shocked at some of the numbers for guys on the Rangers, like Wyatt Langford, because I know he's had a lot of injury.
Almost like, 4 wins projected. Like, don't get me wrong, talented guy, but that kind of surprised me he was that high.
Exactly. And one thing I found interesting before we get a little bit too deep into this is the thing with Jordan being a DH. We know he's not going to be playing the outfield. There was an article that came out yesterday, I think, when the Astros reported to camp, about like how his knee was in worse shape than they thought it was. And obviously we didn't really see him much in the playoffs, right? Or at the end of the season in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And how it was worse than they thought it was. I believe he underwent surgery for that knee. So it should be healing up now. But I think they said, like, you know, how you feeling, blah, blah. And he didn't say he felt great. Like, I don't know. It was weird. I don't remember the exact quote, but it's just interesting to look at a team like the Astros and Jordan specifically, who's projected to have the second most WAR in
the entire
American League West.
Yep.
As a DH, like, is he healthy enough to hold up? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But some of the things that didn't surprise me, the Mariners being the worst at like first base, didn't surprise me.
Whoa, Tyler Soderstrom was worse.
Fair.
Worse.
Fair.
The Mariners' worst positions were
DH and second base.
DH, second base, the bench, and then I think that's it though.
Yeah.
But there's still gaps, right? Like Christian Walker being the most valuable first baseman at 3.2 with like Luke Raley being 1.7. Sure, I think Rayleigh's probably going to play better than 1.7 wins. I think he's got the potential to definitely be better than that. But yeah, there's some definite gaps. What I look at is like, and we all know the trends. We all know like what we're expecting coming into the season of like the Mariners pitching staff is far and away the best without question in the American League West. I think there are some interesting things with the Astros of like guys coming back from injuries that were injured last year. And the Rangers have two big question marks in Jacob deGrom and Tyler Mahle. Will they be able, if they're healthy, they don't have to worry about the depth that they have with, if it's Leiter or if it's Kumar Rocker, like how do they factor in? They don't really have to worry about it as much if their guys are healthy. For the Astros, like right now, Hayden Wesneski is their fifth starter. They probably don't have to worry about him because they're going to get Christian Javier back at some point, right? Like, so some of that advantage that the Mariners hold won't be as big in later in the season for the Astros specifically, but it could be for the Rangers. So like it's a bit of a give and take there. But looking at the Astros lineup, they're consistent, like guys of 3 wins and above consistently, top to bottom. Like the only positions, and we knew this too. Their outfield's horrendous after trading Kyle Tucker. It's like down bad. What are we doing? You employ those guys? You couldn't find anybody better? Damn, bro, you live like this kind of a thing? Out in Dakin, out whatever the hell the stadium's going to be called now.
I forgot.
Rip Minute Maid. But no, their infield, every single position, 3 wins and above. Whereas like the Mariners, their infield outside of Cal is pretty rough. But you get to the outfield and it's like, okay, they're top of their positions or close to. Obviously, Julio being the best, most valuable by projected F4, Randy being the second best left fielder, Robles being the second best right fielder. Like, yeah, there's definitely like it's all literally like you're trying to balance an abacus. It feels like with how the rosters kind of like shake out. Like where the Mariners have advantages, they're immediately disadvantaged at the other spot because they chose to not make moves or some things just didn't pan out the right way. So. I mean, it's all pretty close as far as like WAR projection is concerned at the end. Like the Rangers coming ahead at 44.3 as like the leader. The Mariners being 43.7 and then the Astros being 42. Like all of that's like neck and neck.
And I think that is so this exercise that you did, again, looking back at the Pacoda standings, it's about right. Mm-hmm. Those 3 teams being, neck and neck, which is what the Pacoda standings had as well. They had it going Rangers, Astros, Mariners. This exercise that you did had it going Rangers, Mariners, Astros. Mm-hmm. So the Rangers are a team that they were bad last year after winning the World Series. Whether it was just like a World Series hangover or what it was, I'm not sure. But I fully expect them to, once again, regress to the mean. Like, I don't think that Adolis Garcia is going to be as bad as he was in 2024. Like, I don't know if Jonah Heim is going to continue to be like one of the worst catchers. You know what I mean? Like he was bad.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And of course, one injury changes the entire landscape of all of this. So like the Mariners lose, Julio for a while.
Okay.
That's massive.
Massive.
It's like low taper fade massive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like he's like again, if the Astros lose Yordan, like a lot is riding on certain guys throughout all of this. Which team is the most well-rounded? It's tough to say. I mean, again, there's so much relying on health with all of this. So each team has its own specific thing that it is really good at. The Astros are their infield. The Mariners is their rotation. The Rangers,
I think it's just their depth in general.
Exactly. They're deep. They really are. And they've added quite a bit of depth, like you mentioned, with Jock Peterson, etc. I don't know, man. That is one of the things where, like you said, we applauded it at the beginning of 2024, the depth this team had. But the scariest thing to me is having a bad bench. Because as soon as one guy goes down, you're screwed. I think that if they could have just added one more guy.
Of course.
If they would have just made one more move. Potentially. Like you said, like signing a 30 home run, like a nearly 17% walk rate first baseman, like Daniel Vogelbach.
Of course.
Then this team would be, I would view it much better. But I would be remiss if I did not congratulate my GOAT, Daniel Vogelbach, in accepting a position with the Pirates. I don't know, a hitting instructor position of some kind with the Pittsburgh Pirates earlier today. So that's, he's done, I guess. Like,
Hanging
he's
it
just no
up.
longer. He's hanging up the cleats and picking up the fungo. But yeah, that's my go right there. So hey, maybe the Mariners could have signed him. Would have been good depth. Just saying. That's gonna do it from us here on episode 165 of the Hit It Here podcast. We will see you guys very, very soon, and go Mariners.